All right, let's go ahead and bring in Jonathan Turley now, George Washington University law professor, also a Fox News contributor. Jonathan, let's recap real quickly the charges today that the president's going to face. The four of them: conspiracy to defraud the U.S., conspiracy to obstruct official proceedings, obstruction of official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. Essentially, in layman's terms, means his conspiracy to prevent Americans from having their vote counted, as I understand it, though you can correct me in a moment if that is not accurate. Trump's attorney John Lauro said yesterday morning that he is a smoking gun of innocence. What is that? What do you, in your estimation?
I can't imagine what that is. I think that the best opportunity for Trump in defending the case is at the very threshold. The government's going to face very strong constitutional headwinds going into this case. There are legitimate free speech concerns raised by these charges. You know, essentially, he's being charged with lying. And the government's saying that you can make false statements in an election, but not if you know that they're false. But they don't really establish that he knew that they were false, even if that theory is correct.
Jonathan,
they
if you could just hold on.
All of the people that told him.
Sorry, hold on right there. Just a moment. We're watching the former president come out of his residence inside Bedminster right there with Secret Service agents and security all around him. He is in the process of boarding that black SUV where he is going to head to Newark International Airport. He will then fly here to Washington, D.C. and go directly to the federal courthouse, which is where Griff Jenkins reported from just a moment ago. There's the president inside that SUV underneath that tree in the middle of your screen. We're going to keep tabs on him all hour long as he makes his way towards Washington ultimately. Jonathan, I want to bring you back in now. We're going to keep the photos, the visual rolling on screen as well. Is there a chance here, Jonathan, of the president ultimately serving prison time with this case?
Well, there's always that chance. I'm going to go out on the limb here and predict that the president is going to plead not guilty in his arraignment. I'm fairly confident of that. But it's always dangerous to make predictions about the outcome in criminal cases, particularly when so much depends on these threshold questions. He's going to have a chance to take these issues all the way to the Supreme Court. One of the objections I have to the indictment is that it's essentially trying to create new law here. I mean, it's not new law in the sense of these crimes have been brought in other cases. But what Smith is trying to do here, I haven't seen in any other political case. The Supreme Court said in cases like Alvarez that even a politician who knowingly lied in that case was still protected by the First Amendment. But in this case, what the special counsel has said is that, look at all the people that told him that he did lose the election. What they don't really go into is how many people told him that he won the election. Now, he didn't listen to the first group. I was in that first group of many people who said that he was wrong. But he had others that said that he was right in opposing the election, seeking to block the certification. The other dimension here, which is going to be odd for the court, is that Democratic members also oppose certification of Republican presidents, including Donald Trump. Indeed, during Donald Trump's inauguration, there were riots to go along with claims that he was illegitimate. So the question is where you draw the line. And the concern that many of us have with this indictment is that there's no limiting principle being offered by the Department of Justice of where it will end this role of criminalizing false statements in elections.
Jonathan, at some point we expect the Trump team to argue for postponing this case until after the 2024 election. Obviously, he wants to spend the early months of next year bouncing from early primary state to early primary state. What about that argument, and when do you expect that to play out?
Well, Jack Smith is asking for a speedy trial in both cases. That's usually something that the defense wants. It is a constitutional right that belongs to the defendant. In almost all criminal cases, defendants waive the speedy trial requirement because they need time to prepare. it's going to be very challenging to get this done by the election. You have a May date in Florida. They just filed a superseding indictment in that case. And the Trump team can come back and say, look, you can't file a new, essentially a superseding or new indictment with a new party, new counts, and then stick with the original date. So even that date might not be met before the election. There is one interesting thing here, however. As defense counsel, I'd be tempted to give Smith part of what he's asking for. You know, he wants to move quickly in the D.C. case, and I would give it to him because I think this case has some very controversial and troubling elements up front. I would want, if I were the Trump team, to move this case faster than the other cases, to get it to the Supreme Court, to get an answer on when you can effectively criminalize disinformation, because this does look like a criminal disinformation case.
We're following former President Trump's motorcade now. It has just departed his residence in Bedminster, New Jersey. We watched the president leave the house and get into a black SUV that is in that motorcade now, winding its way through New Jersey. It's headed to Newark International Airport. The president will then fly to Washington, D.C., where he will appear in federal court here to face an arraignment. Coming up in the 3 o'clock hour. I just want to reset this so that people joining us at home now know what we're looking at. Jonathan, while I have you here, can you talk to me about the additional co-conspirators? There's 6 total in this case. I want to know how the potential charges against the other co-conspirators may or may not impact the charges that Trump himself is facing.
Well, I think the Department of Justice clearly would like one of these co-conspirators to flip. That could be part of the reason they weren't indicted. Another reason is that if you indict a lot of co-conspirators, you're going to make it more difficult to get that trial before the election. But I think they clearly hope that at least one of these individuals could end up supporting the government as a witness. The individuals are not hard to figure out. They're the usual suspects. You know, you've got people like John Eastman, Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani. These are the people who gave him that advice. But they also go to the heart of the issue here of whether you can essentially criminalize bad legal advice, not just the giving of it, but the accepting of it. That's a slippery slope, and it should concern all of us. You know, people are blinded, frankly, on both sides. We're living in an age of rage where there's little room for reason. But we do have to consider the implications of this case. I think that the implications are rather dire for free speech. And I think the court's going to have to confront that. Ultimately, I think it'll move quickly to the Court of Appeals and Supreme Court because they will expedite this issue. You can't have these counts without resolving that First Amendment claim.
For viewers just joining us, we are looking at live images from Bedminster, New Jersey, where former President Donald Trump is in a motorcade right now, winding his way toward Newark International Airport. He's expected to fly here to Washington, D.C. to appear at the federal courthouse for his 3rd criminal arraignment. Jonathan, as we look at the various cases against the former president, I'm sure a lot of viewers are wondering which one, in your view, is the most serious of the 3 and potentially 4 if you consider Georgia.
Well, I've said for over a year that the case I would be concerned with remains Mar-a-Lago, those documents. You know, when they filed that indictment, I said, look, this is a strong indictment. These are accounts that they bring often. They've got a lot of evidence to support them. Doesn't mean they can prove it. Doesn't mean that it's true. But that is a very strong indictment. And it doesn't give the president a lot of maneuvering room. Some of what the government showed there is quite damaging. On the other end of the scale is Alvin Bragg's filing in New York, which I think is an almost laughable political prosecution. We are still waiting for Atlanta. And there's going to be some overlap between this indictment and Atlanta. But what we expect out of Georgia is a more detailed indictment as to phone calls made and pressure applied to Georgia officials. We're going to have to see if they have something new. One of the things we said about this indictment was that we were hoping that Jack Smith, if he was going to indict, would come forward with really established precedent and unassailable new evidence. He really didn't do that. I mean, there's nothing particularly new in this indictment. This is largely a collection of what we previously knew. Lots of people told him he was wrong. Lots of people said he couldn't oppose certification. And then there was a small group that assured him he could. And he listened to that second group.
Jonathan Turley, Fox News contributor, thank you so much for your time and your analysis today. Let's bring in Ari Fleischer, former White House press secretary and a Fox News contributor. Ari, welcome.
Thank you.
So we're political guys, right? I covered the Bush campaign in 2000. You were the White House press secretary. From the political perspective, because former President Trump is the front runner in the Republican race for the White House right now, how concerned would you be if you were on the Trump team about him being in courtrooms next year and not out on those early campaign battleground states?
Oh, I think by now the Trump team has made peace with this. I think they're realizing that to win the nomination, candidates have to go to Iowa, they have to go to New Hampshire, and Donald Trump has to go to court. And they're going to treat every one of these court visits just like they would a campaign event. And I anticipate Donald Trump speaking out. His attorneys will probably cringe, but he'll speak out from courtroom steps and wherever he can find a microphone to say, this isn't about me, this is about you, and I'm fighting for you. And he'll turn every one of these court cases into another reason that he should win a primary. That's what I would do if I were Donald Trump.
Ari, this is Jillian. The former president himself has claimed many times over that the piling up of these criminal indictments only fuels his political fire. The polls, in fact, reflect that reasoning. Today, he posted just a few moments before we came on the air something to the effect of, I just need one more indictment to clinch the nomination and eventually win the presidency. Do you think that's accurate? Does that reflect the political climate right now?
Well, if that's not proof that they've made peace with this, I don't know what is. I think that's probably true for a primary. Now, I still believe that he's going to have an alternative. Someone is going to emerge out of the pack, and this will turn into a race at some point, most likely in the fall, early next year, early 2024. But in the general election, I would not make that conclusion. I do think all this hurts Donald Trump in a general election, particularly with the group that Republicans have struggled with recently, which is college-educated suburban voters. It may help him with blue-collar voters who just don't think that you can get a fair shake in Washington. So primary, I think this fortifies him. General, I think this could potentially hurt him, yes.
Let's show our audience the Real Clear Politics average of recent polls, with former President Trump way ahead at 53.9%. Governor DeSantis, 18.1%, then Ramaswamy at 5%, Pence at 4.4%, Haley at 3.4%, Scott at 3.1%. Ari, what about the dilemma for the other Republican candidates who don't want to look like they're supporting the Biden Justice Department and these local prosecutors, but yet keep getting asked about the former president?
Well, that's why I say someone will emerge. There's always an alternative, even for a front runner. And who will that be? Somebody's going to have to find the effective way to take on Donald Trump while still taking on the Biden administration. I think several of them are struggling with how to find the right words to do that. And then Senator Tim Scott seems to be ignoring it all and trying to rise up just by being positive and talking about the greatness of America. So that's where it's going to shake out. But if I can, I want to spend a second, because I've been thinking about the indictment itself and what it means to accuse a politician or criminalize a politician who lies, and in the course of the lie, it contributes to a riot. And the riot leads, in the case I'm thinking of, to arson, looting, attacks on police vehicles, and ultimately the shooting of 2 police officers. And I'm referring to 2014, what happened in Ferguson, Missouri, when a group of people lied about the shooting by a police officer of someone that they all said said, hands up, don't shoot. Hands up, don't shoot. And that motto that the Democrats, including House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries, said regularly, helped contribute to that riot. So why aren't they being prosecuted for lying that helped lead to a riot?